My name is Gary Charles, CEO/founder of ABIS, Advancement of Blacks in Sports. Hence the name of the podcast, Advancement of Blacks in Sports. Today, we have two distinguished gentlemen, or at least one, who will be part of this show. The first one, Coach Dave Leitao.
Gary, how are you doing today? As you mentioned, Dave Leitao, who is part of ABIS, along with Gary, the Chief Strategic Officer, which means that Gary and I argue about things every single day. And most recently, a college basketball coach for 38 years, just left Chicago, and now at Overtime Elite here in Atlanta, Georgia.
Thank you, Dave. The second gentleman is Coach Mike Boynton, Oklahoma State men's basketball. Mike, please introduce yourself.
Hey, Gary. Hey, Dave. Yeah, it's good to be with you guys. As mentioned, my name is Mike Boynton, currently the head basketball coach at Oklahoma State University and a proud member of the Advancement of Blacks in Sports, ABIS, under the leadership of these two young gentlemen. And I'm glad to be here and look forward to offering a little bit of my experience and perspective to our listeners.
Could you explain to everyone why you believe the NCAA has suspended your team for participate in the NCAA tournament this year? And just kind of like, in your own words, what would you like to say?
Well, it really is an unfortunate situation, but more importantly than that, I believe it was a total miscarriage of justice. So I guess back in 2017, a mere 6 months after I was named the head coach at Oklahoma State, the FBI had uncovered some things that were going on amongst college men's basketball coaches. A lot of assistant coaches were wrapped up in this deal. One of them was working on our staff at the time here, but the story is much deeper than that. And it goes on that all these young men eventually go through the justice system, and the NCAA follows that up with their own investigations, to which they really found no wrongdoing in our program. There were no recruiting violations. There was no head coach accountability. There were no academic fraud violations. We didn't have any players compete while ineligible. And still, they made the decision, not once, but even on appeal, to hold our team out of participating in the postseason, which we all know is a big part of why young men choose this route and want to have the opportunity to play on that stage. And so here we are, 5 years from that investigation starting, and having to explain to a bunch of young men who weren't even, not only were they not in our program, but probably weren't even considering being a part of our program at the time that this all was happening, that are essentially bearing the brunt of really poor decision making from what are supposed to be people in positions of leadership within what we do here at the college level. And I'm really disappointed for them. But I also know that ultimately I have a job to try to make them better and push them forward. We certainly want to make sure that they knew that we have people fighting for them. And I'm certainly thankful that ABIS has stood up and has championed a voice on their behalf.
Mike, I think I've known you since you were 13 or 14, so this one really hit home to me. And there's a lot that I can say, and I'm trying to be as cool as possible, just like you are. But the reason, or part of the reason ABIS was created was for a situation like these.
So I'm the kind of person, and I think Mike and all coaches in his or most positions, you have to be a little bit politically correct because you represent more than yourself. You represent your kids in a program, a university, a president, a system. And so you have to protect that while understanding what you do and how you think is very critical to not only your own self-esteem, but the people that are in your locker room. In the space I'm at right now, I don't have those same parameters to operate under, so I can be a lot freer in my thought process and my words. So the understanding of what Mike has been through and his program has been through, most importantly those kids, because they only get one opportunity to do this, is the why. Why is it like this? And so Mike and I talk a little bit about it, but I say this all the time. You know, decisions are made by a hierarchy in this country and in this world that don't represent our best interests. And by our, I mean people of color, black folks in general, and particularly when we're talking about basketball or college athletics, black coaches. And so essentially, the NCAA can make a ruling arbitrarily against Oklahoma State, specifically Mike and his kids, simply because they can. And this is, and Mike, you can correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first incident that anybody could ever remember that you have a postseason ban imposed upon a program without any one of the 5 egregious acts, whether it's head coach responsibility, lack of institutional control, a failure to monitor your program, recruiting violations, as you mentioned, Mike, or academic fraud. Usually any one or all of those 5 constitutes the ability for the NCAA to give you a postseason ban. None of those happen, as Mike stated, but yet they cannot participate in a 2022 NCAA tournament. For those who use common sense, or anybody who has a good thought process, you ask yourself why. Why does a black coach in this program have to suffer? And as I mentioned before, you know, the precedent set you can sometimes use in determining what can happen in a case, in this particular case, or you don't have to use that. And so to have those rules at your disposal means that you can operate any which way that you deem necessary for this case and not have to live by that decision. You can walk away and go about your day and leave the rest for Mike and his program to handle. So for me, I just don't understand it. I never will. The NCAA doesn't have to be accountable for those decisions. And Mike is left to have to clean up the mess, particularly with those young men and their families who have made the promise to play as hard as they can, do the right thing at Oklahoma State.
You know, Dave, one of the things that you said is that the black coach. Why is it always us? And what gets me now is the goal that they have to think that we're not seeing it. Okay, hence one of the hashtags we have with ABIS, which is, do you see what we see? Because I don't see them treating the white institution, the white coach, I should say, the same way. I saw what they did with North Carolina State in regard to Mike Godfrey. It's always the black guy. The guys who went to jail, black. Even in 2021, now we're in 2022, these things continue to happen. Hence the reason for this organization. You know, Dave, I remember after George Floyd murder, I called you. I called you with an idea about, creating an organization, ABIS, because I just felt that it was time for us to do something. And I could hear the passion, in your voice when we talked about it. Can you speak on, about your passion in regards to ABIS, why you thought this was a good idea?
To kind of throw it back to you, and you said it, and I felt it, we all felt it, you're kind of sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? And so what can you do? What kind of voice? And I think what's going on in college basketball is we have a rare opportunity because of our numbers and because of our intellect to band together to create a voice that can hopefully be a voice of reason and specifically a voice of change for all the things, not just what happens in one particular incident, but what happens over the course of the dealings of the NCAA and as it relates to college athletics and specifically college basketball. And so I just felt at that time, after many years in this business, that it's treated me very well. I'm have lived out a dream, but at the same point in time, I understand how the rules of the game are played. And as I joked to Mike before, just imagine if the hierarchy, in this case the NCAA or anybody in a power structure which is represented by decision makers who are white, the majority of them, and that's been that way for 400 years. If your team had five players and you get to go out on the floor and compete against team minority, who are blacks, Hispanics, women, everybody who's underrepresented, and they only get 4 players. Who's going to win that game almost all the time? It's going to be the people that have 5 players. And so those kinds of things really irk me. And what has happened, most recently, not just with Mike, but in the cases that you mentioned, really represent that miscarriage of justice or the inequity of 5 versus 4. And if you look at it from the other point of view, if the rules are stacked in your favor, you get to decide how the game is played. You make up the rules, you control the referees, and you're only playing against 4 players. Why would you ever change the rules? So it's high time, if you use common sense, as I mentioned, to be as loud with your voice as you possibly can, to be as collective as you can, to let people know that these rules continue to be unfair. We're not only upset about it, but we're collectively going to try to influence the amount of change that would make a difference, not for us because we're in really good position, but for the young people who have to go out into the world after their college experience and understand that 5-on-4 has to be turned around and created into an advantage for you, and how best can you go about doing that?
Dave, as I continue to tell, all of us, is this, that don't allow the loudest voice in the room to continue to dictate what's going on, especially when they're wrong. If you believe you're right, you have to speak up. If we don't speak up now, when are we ever going to speak up, about these continuous injustice that goes on in these games? And, Mike, you have been a loud voice, within, ABIS, and have been, so powerful in the way you speak and the way you continue to work within the ABIS, organization. Please, tell us why you believe so much in ABIS.
I've always believed strongly in advocating for people who feel like they can't advocate for themselves. And I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and then attended school at the University of South Carolina in Columbia, where I studied African American history and got my degree in it. And so I took a lot of pride in learning about my own personal past, but also the past of the people who've been, disenfranchised. And what I've learned is whenever I would have an opportunity to lend a voice to those who need help, then I would do so. And being a college head basketball coach at a school like Oklahoma State allows me to at least have a little more influence than I did when I was a child running around the streets of Bed-Stuy. And so I wouldn't take it for granted that I would always be in this position. And I knew that when this organization was formed, I wanted to do my part to help. And I think I told you this. I don't care what responsibility I have. I don't need a title. But if there's some work to be done, I'm willing to get behind the scenes and try to do that work.
Mike,
and it's because, as a father and coach, I know I have a responsibility to help the next generation of young men find themselves in this world.
Mike, there's a lot of people who talk the talk, but they don't necessarily walk the walk. And you have done all of it. Everything you said just now, you have shown us within the structure of ABIS. You've just been a phenomenal young man, and I take some pride in that, just, having known you since you were a young man, to see what you have become. And don't allow what's going on to take that spirit, away from you. We're in this, together. So being part of ABIS, is there one particular thing about ABIS that sticks out to you that you really feel good about? Or maybe don't feel
a lot of it does, to be honest, but the most important thing to me is just the commitment to the overall experience of everybody. And for people who don't know, ABIS isn't just about basketball. We've got representation pretty much from every sport that's played. And there's a lot of female involvement. There's a lot of female leadership amongst ABIS. And truly, the women, while we have 3 men here, are really the ones driving the train of ABIS. And that's really, really important because I'm a father of a young lady, and I want my daughter to understand that she can do and be anything and not have to settle. So I think the work that they're doing to lift up the voices of those who've been suppressed in that position is something that I'm really, really passionate about helping.
Mike, I love that. I have 4 kids, and 3 of them are women. And I have always talked to them about, don't allow anyone to stop you from your goal. And you're right. The women are driving the train here. And I remember one of the things that Coach Leonard Hamilton from Florida State said to me a long time ago. He said, Gary, if we don't watch out, they're gonna run us right over. And you know what? And I remember laughing. But you know what? These women are doing the damn thing. And Dave, you and I a lot of time are in these meetings when the women start talking and they're so powerful and they're passionate. We just smile, but love it every minute of it. Dave, tell us some of the things that you like or maybe don't like in regard to ABIS. But be careful what you say, right?
Yeah. There's not anything that I don't like because it's all created I love it. And the most important thing for me is the camaraderie, the family atmosphere, because we all talk about one common goal. And as you mentioned, and I remember, Gary, on a Sunday afternoon, our introduction, calling you and calling Felicia Hall Allen, who made the connection to all of the women, not just in college basketball, but across the board. That introduction for the three of us and you to her for the first time was powerful, or as powerful as anything we've ever done or ever can do, because it opened up so many doors to powerful women that are doing great things. And as we see a year plus later, not only is Felicia continued to do powerful work, but Nikki Fargas, who's the president of the Las Vegas Aces, and names would go on and on and on about women who are critical thinkers, extremely organized, and powerful in their own right, while understanding as a Black woman, you get double indemnity. You get the Blackness, which is one reason why you can be left back, and being a woman is another reason why you can be left back. But they use that to fuel the ability to understand there's nothing more powerful than an educated Black woman.
Dave, I remember calling Coach John Chaney about what we were doing, and just so everyone know, I went to Chaney State. At the time it was called Chaney State, now it's called Chaney University, HBCU school. Coach Vivian Stringers, because she was the women coach at Chaney at the time when I was there, and she's the one that said, reach out to Felicia Hall Allen. And by the way, everyone, get that right. It's not Felicia, it's Felicia. Don't get that wrong. And Felicia, as Dave mentioned, organized the women coaches. And next thing I knew, we had over 30 of them on a Zoom call, including Nikki Fargas. And Dave, I also remember when you reached out to Dawn Staley. And Dawn Staley basically said, what do you need me to do? Now, this woman could be anywhere she wants to be, but she decided to be there. And every single step of the way, she keeps going and saying, what do you need me to do? That's powerful. Joni Taylor. We could go on and on. And now, you have Beverly Kearney, former track coach for Texas, University of Texas. I believe she's produced probably over 20 Olympians. So the organization continues to grow in all kinds of ways. And Dave saying that, and because we started to grow so fast, I know one of your concerns was that we didn't lose our weight, with ABIS. Explain to everyone when you say you wanted to make sure that ABIS does not lose their weight.
Well, it became the most powerful message that we could send after the George Floyd murder, to be able to understand how important at that moment in time to use your voice, your collective energy to create change. And I think it made a difference. It was, in my opinion, the reason why the Derek Chauvin trial went the way it did. It's the reason why the Ahmaud Arbery trial went the way it did, because it put an extra amount of pressure on the system that has carried the injustices for many, many years. And so now, where do we go from here? And so the answer to that is you have to understand the kind of pressure that you have to keep on the system that for 400 years has not and will not change. And the only way you could possibly create a dent in its armor is to be a voice of change. And so that means the world to me. And one of the things I'd like to kind of ask Mike, if I could, because I think people that are in leadership positions one of the things that they've had to do throughout this process is endure. And so each person has their own individual story. And I know you do, Mike, and things that you've had to overcome. You mentioned being from Brooklyn and going to Bishop Lockett and going to South Carolina, which is, the deepest of deep in a red state, and understanding that mentality, overcoming, then getting into coaching and being able to advance to the point where somebody consider you a good choice to become a head coach at a Power 5 school. And those experiences allowing you to get through what you've been through this current year and still keep the proper mindset of service to young people for the generation that's upcoming. I know there's some fantastic things that you could share with us about what brought you from the streets of Brooklyn to Stillwater, Oklahoma.
Yeah, I mean, the story of my life is truly about being around the right people. And it wasn't always by choice. Some of it was my private. I'm a believer. The Lord has led me and really guided me through some difficult moments. But at the end of the day, I was raised by really good parents. I was taught the game and life by really good coaches. Kenny Pretlow, Bob Leckie, Ernie Lodge, Thurman Plant, the list goes on. And I was exposed to some things maybe you shouldn't be exposed to at an early age, growing up where I did. But I was also protected. And I was protected by people who cared about me becoming a good person. I still remember my mom threatening Bob Leckie that I wouldn't play basketball if my grades weren't right. And that sent a message to me about the importance of education to my mom. And I really get disheartened sometimes when I hear parents whose children are struggling in school only are concerned themselves with how many minutes their kids are playing. And what we need to be talking about is what this can become for them long term. And I tell my players every time, I didn't play a single day of professional basketball. I haven't played a single meaningful basketball game since the day I left college. But I feel like I've been a success because I took advantage of the opportunity that the education provided for me. And I always valued people. George Ravelin's a good mentor of mine. Eddie Fogel is a mentor of mine. And those guys have still continued to help me in my professional life. And so now that I have a family of my own, and I really understand the value of doing things the right way, treating people the right way, respecting the process, not wanting to skip steps, but also at the same time recognizing challenges are inevitable. We're not going to go through life. If your life hasn't been hard, watch out, it's coming. That's what I tell our guys all the time. Difficult moments are going to arise, and you just have to, you have to have something that you're grounded in. For me, it's been my faith and the people that I've been around, and I think that's the thing that's carried me through every up and down that I could imagine. And I'm thankful for all those people that I mentioned, but there's several others that I could talk about as well. The players that I've coached and their impact on my life, but also the guys that I played with and played for were tremendously impactful in why I am where I am and how I got where I am today.
Mike, powerful stuff. I mean, you mentioned Kenny Pretlow, Thurman player. And I remember meeting Kenny. I believe it was at Left Rack City at the tournament out there, and he was coaching at the time BQE, Brooklyn Queen Express, with Artie Cox, and he was so passionate about the way he was just running his team and everything else, and I saw something in him, and I remember the way he used to coach you guys, a heck of a coach, both of them, really were. And Thurman, I could still, remember Thurman's squeaky voice, as we speak, and obviously we had some big games, Thurman and I, Riverside versus the New York Panthers, and I'll never forget, because those guys helped me strive to become better at my craft, in basketball. Absolutely. So it's amazing that you're mentioning your names and you mention your mom, you mention your parents, which is the key. And you mentioned that she wasn't gonna let you play, and I can remember in 8th grade, my mother walking into the classroom, okay, and I missed the cool, and she walked into the classroom and told the teacher, if you have one more problem with him, one more, let me know. See, my mom didn't play that. So while everyone was laughing, like you, I said, you know what? I took my chair and moved it to the other side of the classroom away from the clowns. And that was the last time anyone heard a peep, out of me. And when you go back and you think about it, you realize those moments is what makes you, who you are, or become, who you are. And that's what we have to continue to do. Because back then, anyone could hit you, right? Your teacher, your neighbor, everyone else. I mean, times have changed, but I realized just how powerful, that was. And one of the things, Mike, I've noticed in you have a all black staff, and a lot of coaches seem to be afraid to do that, but the white coaches aren't. And I think it probably has something to do with what Dave said earlier about they set the rules, okay? But you are just, I'm doing what I want to do. So tell us a little bit about that, Mike.
Well, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. I'm very aware of the culture in our profession, and the thought process of black coaches are recruiters and motivators and relationship guys, and white coaches are the intellectual X's and O's, strategic people. And I just don't buy into it. I learned the game at an early age. I've studied this game. And this isn't rocket science. We're not doing heart surgery out there on the basketball court, right? You're trying to get guys to work together. You're trying to put plans together. And there's certainly a lot of capable black men out there that can do this job. They can do my job. And so the plan wasn't to hire 3 black coaches as assistants. The plan was to find the 3 best assistant coaches out there. And in Terrence Rencher, Larry Blunt, and David Cason, I have 3 of the best assistant coaches in the country. And they're all capable of doing X's and O's just as well as they're capable of having great relationships and recruiting and managing a budget and understanding how to show up to work on time and dress right and speak well. And I feel like those guys can go in any room, whether it's with donors or parents or other coaches, and certainly be capable of doing whatever the job that is necessary at the time that they can do it. And what I want to do is I want one of our guys to become a head coach from this staff, because that'll say even more that not only can we all work together and be successful, but that you can also advance from here, from an all-black staff, and become a head coach. And I think all of them will have an opportunity in time. And I'm just thankful that I have an administration, because it takes them having my back, right? I don't get to make decisions in a vacuum, but I'm thankful that they didn't bat an eye. They supported it, and that's saying a lot about where we are now versus probably where we were even probably 5 years ago, in all honesty.
Guys, one of my proudest moments working on Wall Street was working for a gentleman named William Crosby, and his department had mostly minorities, not just blacks, but Asian and so on. And we handled billions of dollars, not hundreds, but billions of dollars with no problem. And I remember one time he was asked, William, why do you have so many minorities in your department? And he said, well, if I don't hire them, who's going to? And I thought the object of this was to hire the best people. And I love that statement, that he made, And Mike, that goes to, something that you said. And, in saying that, Mike, as far as best people, we started a year ago the watch list, which is to let the world know who the top black assistant coaches are and who the top head coaches, in the mid-market and so on. And I'm really proud of that. Now, you and Dave are 2 of the members who are part of that committee. What do you feel about the watch list? Why do you think it's so important?
Yeah, I think a lot of times what you have to do is you have to put things in people's plain sight so that they can't rely on the ignorance of them not doing their jobs well.
I love it.
And there are a lot of capable, talented people out there who they don't know, but because they don't want to know. And it's easy, if there's no list, they can say, well, these are the people we knew about. Well, now we've exposed that. And we've created we've taken away one of the excuses from them, the awareness excuse. And I think it'll help go a long way to at least getting people opportunities to get in a room and give themselves a chance to attain some of these positions we're talking about.
I love that. I love that. Dave, you had a lot to say about the watch list, in the past. Tell us about your feelings about the watch list.
Yeah, so when you make a decision to change coaches at your university, it includes some very critical people. It starts with an athletic director who may or may not understand or know who is available and who's qualified, who's good, because most people operate in their level of comfort. So the people in their circle are certainly not assistants or young head coaches that they can identify with. So if they know a few, then that college president definitely knows none, or very few. And then the people that they hire to help them make those decisions, those search firms probably don't know that either, because they don't operate in understanding relationships with people of color. And so the watch list, as Mike said, creates the connectivity and takes the excuse away. Well, I don't know a whole lot of black coaches that are qualified for this job. Well, here's a list of people that we have deemed ready, and we are coming from a space where you understand that we know who and what we're talking about. And so for recommending a name, we're not putting it on in front of you just because we want to give you a list of black people. These people are accomplished. They've been through the ringer. They're not just quote unquote recruiters. They're, as Mike said, they're qualified in so many other areas, are handling budgets or doing other things than just bringing recruits to campus. And so that, as Mike said, and I piggyback on that, eliminates the excuse that they've traditionally used as to why they go to their level of comfort when hiring. So in a year's time, it's paid dividends. I think the combination of how the world has changed after the George Floyd murder, plus what ABIS is doing with the watch list, creates, in this last hiring cycle, over 50% in both men's and women's basketball of the hires were black coaches, or at least minority coaches. And so that's a huge win for the underrepresented. And where now we have to continue that momentum so it doesn't go backwards. We want to have that grow and have the people that have been put in place be successful, because it makes it much easier for somebody to make the next decision on a young black assistant, male or female, when they know the person that came before them is doing a really good job.
I love that. Dave, it's kind of like we say all the time, right? ADs and search firms, we're giving you the answer to the test. We're giving it to you. All you have to do is fill it out. That's all. All right? So as Mike said, you can't come back to us now and say you don't know, because we're telling you. All right? And it's very important for us to give you the right name. And I want to make sure I tell everyone before y'all start calling these two guys, there are a lot more people as part of this committee for the watch list, okay? So don't blame them if your name's not on there. Blame yourself. Hey guys, we could go on forever, right? But I need to talk about the ABIS Award Gala that we're doing Memorial Weekend. Dave, you played a big part of that, because one of the things that you said to us in the executive committee was that how great the Black Coaches Association was in the past, and how y'all would get together on Memorial Weekend and did some things. And that was kind of like part of the reason why this gala, I've had this idea for over 10 years. So I thought Memorial Weekend was awesome. Please tell everyone a little bit about the gala.
Yeah, so I became a member of the BCA, the Black Coaches Association, which became the most powerful voice in sports, not just for people of color, but in sports back in 1988. And the best thing that happened, or one of the best things that happened as part of that organization, was a yearly convention. The first one was in Key Biscayne, Florida. It was probably about 50 coaches and families strong, and it grew to upwards of 500 or 1,000 people at its peak. Part of what happened it was that you could congregate at a hotel for 4 days, spend time with each other's family, each other's young children. We watched each other grow, we exchanged thoughts, ideas, we had fun, but most importantly, it was about professional development. It was about understanding why you're in this business and what you need to do. And at the time, those founding members, John Thompson, as you mentioned, George Raveling, Mike, John Chaney, Nolan Richardson, and others, created an atmosphere where you as a Black coach felt prideful in what you were doing and where you could go. So when you talked about the gala, Gary, that's the first thing I thought of. It's great not to have an award show to honor those who do great things in our industry, both men, women, and all sports. But most importantly for me, it's a chance to get together, share your experiences, share your families, and understand that we're in this together. We have more commonalities in this fight for justice, not just in this world, but in our profession, and having a weekend to do it to honor each other and make a difference. And I think that is the essence of why ABIS is here, and giving us an opportunity to have this gala will enhance that even more.
Love it. Great, powerful words, Dave. Mike, how do you feel about the gala that's coming up?
Yeah, I'm excited about it. Look forward to it for a lot of the same reasons Dave mentioned, but also to continue to build our network. I think to continue to bring more visibility and more access to people who are coming up in this profession. This type of organization, the BCA was kind of on this downtime when I got into coaching. And be honest, we just haven't had that kind of centralized voice in my time as a coach. And certainly I believe it could have been beneficial for me had that continued on. But now that ABIS is around, I think there's an opportunity to reignite that pride that Dave talked about. And that we're doing this for not just ourselves and our families, although that's very important. We're doing this because there's a community of people that need us and that we need to all be successful. So that the next Dave Leitao, the next Gary Charles, the next Mike Boynton has something to look up to, some people to connect with when they get into this that can help them navigate it. Because without people to help you, this is really, really difficult. But if you have people who've experienced all the things that Dave Leitao experienced, then they can help Mike Boynton understand, well, Mike, you know what? You're going to move into this part of the country. I lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma for a year or so. I can tell you about what the landscape of that environment is for you and your young family. And so I think it's critically important that we continue to build this and that as many people can continue to join ABIS and understand that there's work to be done and that we all together can lift as we climb.
Mike, Dave, I want to thank you, both of y'all, for coming on. Powerful words. Wow. Powerful words by two powerful gentlemen. Everyone, I want to thank you all for being part of this. If you want to become a member, actually I would suggest become a member of ABIS because together we're powerful. Go to www.weareabis.org. All right, everyone. Please remember, the ABIS Awards Gala will be Memorial Weekend, May 27th to the 29th in Las Vegas at the Resorts World Hotel. Come on, be part of it. You're going to love it.